Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and don't forget to leave a comment telling us where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. What would you do if someone knocked on your door when you knew you were the only one home? That question has been looping through Emily Carter's mind for years, ever since the night she swore she heard it. 3 slow knocks, each one heavier than the last, and when she opened the door, there was no one there. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. It started on a quiet October evening, the kind of night when the air outside feels still, too still, and the shadows under the streetlights seem to breathe. Emily was 17 then, a high school senior in the small town of Willow Creek, Oregon. Her parents had left for the weekend to attend her aunt's anniversary, leaving her alone in their 2-story home at the end of Maple Street. It wasn't the first time she'd been left alone, but it was the first time she felt alone, the kind of loneliness that hums, like the static of an old TV in the background of your mind. She turned up the volume on Netflix, trying to drown it out. The sound of laughter and chatter filled the living room, clashing against the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Tick, tick, tick. At 9:37 p.m., the power flickered. Not the usual blink from a weak connection, no. This was slower, almost deliberate. The lights dimmed until the house was swallowed in shadows, then came back with a faint hum. Emily's phone buzzed. A notification. Front door camera, motion detected. Her heart jumped. They'd installed the camera last summer after a string of break-ins around town. She opened the app and froze. The feed showed her front porch. Empty. Just the faint light from the street lamp and the swaying of wind through the maple tree. Then, the motion alert blinked again. Something moved. Not fast, not like a person running. It was a slow, shifting blur at the edge of the frame, almost like the pixels themselves were warping. Emily frowned and leaned closer to the screen. The shape unfolded. It looked like someone standing, too tall, too still. The figure didn't have a face, just darkness. Then, 3 knocks. On the door. Emily screamed, nearly dropping the phone. The knocks were real, loud, right behind the wood of her front door. "Who's there?" she shouted, her voice cracking. Silence. Her heart pounded in her throat. She glanced again at the camera feed. The porch was empty. Whoever had been there was gone. She backed away, her phone trembling in her hand. She told herself it had to be some glitch, maybe a neighbor's kid playing a prank. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something had been watching her. She tried calling her mom, but the call didn't connect. No service, not even Wi-Fi. Just a strange, low static in her ear, like whispering voices under the surface. She hung up. For the next hour, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The refrigerator hum seemed distant, muffled. Every sound felt like it was being swallowed by something unseen. At 10:45, she heard the footsteps. From upstairs. Slow, dragging steps, one after another. She froze at the bottom of the staircase, staring upward. The light from the hall lamp barely reached the 2nd floor, just enough to see the railing and the first few steps. Her mind raced. No one else has a key. No one else should be here. The steps stopped. Emily swallowed hard and whispered, "Hello?" No answer. She picked up the flashlight from the drawer, her hands shaking so badly the beam danced across the walls. "Mom?" She tried again, even though she knew they were miles away. A faint creak responded, like weight shifting on old wood. She slowly climbed the stairs, one trembling step at a time. Each footfall felt deafening in the silence. When she reached the top, she saw her bedroom door, half open, though she was sure she'd closed it. The flashlight beam trembled as she raised it. Inside her room, the air was freezing. She could see her breath. She stepped inside. Everything looked normal. The posters on the walls, the bed, the open window curtain fluttering slightly from the wind. Then she noticed her mirror. It was fogged up from the inside, and written across it, in a smeared line of condensation, were 3 words: "Let me in." Emily dropped the flashlight, the beam spinning wildly. She stumbled back, nearly tripping over her own shoes, and ran out of the room. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She sprinted down the hallway, but halfway down, she heard whispering. A soft, overlapping murmur, like dozens of voices whispering her name. Ailey. Ailey. She turned toward the sound, and saw something standing at the end of the hall. A figure. Tall. Thin. Its head tilted slightly like it was curious. The same faceless shape from the camera. The hallway light flickered, and for one split second she thought she saw its face. Not human. Just darkness. A black pit that seemed to stretch inward forever. Emily screamed and ran for the stairs, nearly falling in her panic. She bolted down, but as soon as her feet hit the last step, she heard the front door unlock itself. Click. The door creaked open an inch. A gust of cold air swept in, carrying a faint scent of damp earth, and something else. Something metallic, like old blood. Emily grabbed her phone again, desperate to dial 911, still no signal. The static whispered louder now. She could almost make out words. "You let it in." Her flashlight flickered, then died completely. The only light came from the porch, and from the faint outline of footprints forming slowly on the carpet. One step, then another, moving toward her. Emily backed up until her shoulder hit the wall. "Please," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "Leave me alone." The whispers stopped, and then silence. Her breathing slowed. She dared to hope whatever it was had gone, until the kitchen light turned on by itself. Flick. She could see it now, the shadow standing by the sink, tall enough that its head brushed the ceiling. It wasn't moving, just standing there, its body flickering like it wasn't entirely real. Emily backed toward the front door, fumbling for the handle, but when she turned it, the door wouldn't open. Something had locked it from the outside. Then, behind her, the whisper returned, right next to her ear this time. "You opened the door for me." The lights went out, and Emily screamed, the kind of scream that doesn't sound human anymore. Emily didn't remember falling. One moment she was screaming into the dark, the next she was on the cold floor gasping for air. Her head throbbed, her vision swam in and out of focus, and for a long moment she couldn't move. Every inch of her body felt like it had been drained of warmth, of strength, of will. The silence was absolute. Even the ticking of the grandfather clock downstairs had stopped. Then came the whisper again, faint this time, echoing from somewhere deep in the walls. "Emily, come upstairs." Her stomach twisted. The voice sounded so familiar, like her mother's voice, only slower, stretched out, wrong. Emily sat up, clutching her flashlight even though it no longer worked. She pressed the power button again and again until finally, weak light flickered out of it. The beam was dim and trembling, barely illuminating the living room around her. The front door was still locked tight, the deadbolt turned all the way. She tried the handle again. Nothing. The metal felt icy against her palm, almost pulsing, like it was alive. That's when she noticed the photos on the wall, family pictures that had always hung above the stairs, her parents' wedding photo, her 10th birthday, summer vacations, were all different. The people were still there, but their faces were wrong. Their eyes were gone, replaced by smudges of shadow. In one picture, Emily's own face was blurred entirely, as if something had wiped her out of existence. She staggered back, her breath trembling. "This isn't real," she whispered. "This isn't..." A loud bang came from upstairs. Something had fallen, or been thrown. Emily's mind screamed to run, but her body moved before she could think. She climbed the stairs again, heart hammering against her ribs, each creak of the steps echoing through the house like a heartbeat. When she reached the top, her bedroom door was now wide open. The cold air was pouring out, heavier than before, smelling faintly of mildew and rot. Inside, her mirror was still fogged, but the words had changed. Now it said, "I see you." The letters dripped slowly, as if written in something wet. She stepped closer, her flashlight shaking in her hand. The reflection behind her, something moved. A shadow darted across the room, fast and fluid, disappearing behind the closet door. "Who's there?" she whispered, barely breathing. The closet door creaked, once, twice. Then it slowly opened. Inside, nothing. Just her hanging clothes and a pile of shoes. But there was a sound, a faint rustling like breathing, soft, shallow, right behind the coats. Emily reached out with a trembling hand, pushing the clothes aside. Her fingers brushed something cold. She jerked back, gasping, and the flashlight flickered again. In that single flash of light, she saw it. A face, pale and sunken, eyes black as ink, mouth open in a silent scream, staring back at her from between the hanging coats. She screamed and stumbled backward, slamming the closet door shut. She backed against the wall, clutching her flashlight like a weapon. Her whole body shook uncontrollably. For a few seconds there was silence, then slowly, a knock from inside the closet. Once, twice, 3 times. Her heart stopped. The same rhythm, the same knock, the same one she'd heard at the door. Emily couldn't take it anymore. She bolted out of the room, running down the hall and into her parents' bedroom. She slammed the door behind her and pressed her back against it, panting hard. The air here was colder still, like stepping into a freezer. Her breath came out in visible puffs. She flicked her flashlight around. The bed was untouched, her mother's vanity still filled with perfume bottles and jewelry. But something was off. On the nightstand lay a small music box, one she didn't remember ever seeing before. It was shaped like a small wooden house, carved with symbols she didn't recognize, looping lines and jagged triangles that looked almost ancient. And then it started to play, soft at first, a lullaby, slow, eerie, the kind you'd hear in an old child's nursery rhyme. Emily froze. She hadn't touched it. The lid creaked open on its own, and the tiny ballerina inside began to turn. Only her face wasn't painted. It was blank, completely smooth. The song played slower now, the notes warping into something darker, deeper. Each rotation of the ballerina's head seemed to twist more, until its neck bent at an impossible angle. Emily screamed and threw the box against the wall. It shattered, the song cutting off instantly, but the air didn't go quiet. Instead, the walls began to whisper. Dozens of voices, all whispering her name. Some low, some high, some sounding like her own voice, repeating the same phrase over and over. You let it in. You let it in. You let it in. Emily covered her ears, tears streaming down her face. Stop! Stop, please! She cried. But the whispers only grew louder, filling every corner of the room until it felt like they were inside her head. Then, they stopped, and a voice spoke, clear, right behind her ear. He's in the house now. Emily turned sharply, but no one was there, just the curtains swaying slightly in the breeze. Except, the window was closed. The curtains moved again, and this time something stood behind them. A tall shadow, motionless, but its outline wrong, like a person whose body didn't fit quite right. Emily's breath caught. Slowly the shadow began to move, stepping out from behind the curtains. The faint light from the flashlight touched it, and for the first time she saw its full form. Its skin was stretched, too tight over its bones, gray and thin like paper. Its mouth opened wide, but there were no teeth, just a void, a black pit that seemed to swallow light. It didn't move closer. It just watched her, tilting its head the same way it had in the hallway. Then it whispered in a deep, hollow voice, one that vibrated through her chest. "You opened the door. Now close it if you can." Before she could scream, the lights exploded. Glass shattered everywhere. Emily fell to the ground, covering her head. When she looked up, the thing was gone, vanished like smoke. But the air wasn't empty. She could still feel it hovering, watching, and on the wall behind her, carved deep into the wood, were the same 3 words again. "Let me in." Only this time, something else was written beneath them. A 4th word, freshly scratched, dripping dark and wet. "Tonight." Emily's breath came out ragged. Her flashlight flickered out for the last time. From somewhere deep in the walls, the sound of scratching began, slow, rhythmic, like fingernails dragging through wood. It moved along the walls, circling the room, closer and closer to where she sat. Then, silence, and a whisper, so close it brushed her ear again. "He's not outside anymore." The silence in the house wasn't real silence anymore. It was alive, pulsing, full of listening. Emily could feel it. It was as though the house itself was waiting for her to breathe too loudly, waiting for her heartbeat to quicken so it could move again. She sat perfectly still on the cold bedroom floor, clutching the broken flashlight in her trembling hands, listening to her own ragged breath echo back at her. It had written "tonight" on the wall. The word burned itself into her thoughts. The handwriting, no, the claw marks, looked too deliberate to be random, too human to be coincidence. Her shaking fingers traced the carved grooves in the wood, still slick with something sticky and dark. She pulled her hand back fast, bile rising in her throat. It wasn't ink. It wasn't paint. It was blood. Emily stumbled back, gagging, tripping over shards of the shattered light bulb. Her hands stung, small cuts forming where the glass sliced her palms. She wanted to scream, but the fear was so thick it felt glued to her throat. Suddenly, from somewhere below her, she heard the faint sound of the television turning on. Static first, then the soft hum of voices, far too low to make out the words. The living room TV. Her phone was still dead. No signal, no Wi-Fi, no lights. But somehow, the TV had found power. Emily crept downstairs, step by step, her bare feet whispering against the cold wooden floor. The house smelled different now. The faint rot had turned sharper, like burning wires mixed with wet soil. Every shadow along the hallway looked stretched and distorted, like something unseen had tugged at their edges. When she reached the living room, the television screen flickered in static. Lines of distortion rippled across the screen, forming shapes that almost looked like faces. Dozens of them, blinking in and out, melting into each other. And then, for a split second, she saw herself. Her own face. On the screen. Sitting in that exact same living room, staring directly at her. Emily froze. The image twitched, distorted, then smiled. Her reflection smiled, but she didn't. Her real face was frozen in horror, while the version on the screen tilted its head and mouthed something she couldn't hear. She stepped closer. The static crackled louder. Her double leaned closer too until its mouth pressed against the inside of the glass and whispered, "He's behind you." Emily spun around, but nothing was there. When she turned back, the TV had gone black. Just her reflection now, dimly lit by the glow of the dead screen. Her chest rose and fell in shallow bursts. Then the reflection blinked. She didn't. Her reflection blinked again, then smiled, slowly, wide, until its mouth opened far wider than any human mouth could. The glass began to crack. Hairline fractures snaked across the screen like spiderwebs. "Stop," she whispered, backing away. The cracks deepened. From the center of the screen, a hand pressed outward, stretching the glass. The skin was gray, thin, the fingernails long and black. Another hand appeared beside it. The screen shattered outward. Emily screamed and ran, shards of glass raining behind her. She didn't stop until she reached the hallway, and then she saw something that made her blood run cold. Her own reflection, not in the TV now, but in the hallway mirror. Only it wasn't mirroring her. It was moving on its own. Her reflection tilted its head to the side, just like the creature had. Its eyes were darker than before, deep, endless black. It raised a hand, slow and deliberate, and placed its palm against the inside of the mirror. Emily, trembling, couldn't stop herself. Some part of her felt pulled. She raised her hand too, placing her fingers against the glass. The surface was colder than ice. The reflection smiled, and then it spoke. "You were never alone, Emily." She stumbled back, tripping over the rug and falling hard onto the floor. The mirror rippled, not cracked, not shattered, but rippled like the surface of water. Her reflection stepped forward, its form stretching, pushing through the glass. Its hand emerged first, dripping with black liquid that steamed as it hit the carpet. Emily scrambled to her feet, running into the kitchen. She grabbed the first thing she saw, the kitchen knife, and pointed it toward the hallway. Her heart pounded so violently she could barely see straight. From the hall, she heard the sound of something dragging across the walls. A slow, scraping noise, nails or claws pulling deep lines into the paint. "Stay away from me," she screamed. "Leave me alone." The sound stopped. Then, a low voice from the darkness. "You already invited me in." The kitchen lights flickered. One by one, the bulbs popped. Small bursts of sparks. In the glow of the final flicker, Emily saw her reflection again. But this time, it wasn't in a mirror. It was standing in the room with her. It looked exactly like her. Same face, same hair, same trembling lips. But the eyes, they were bottomless voids. The doppelganger smiled softly. "You shouldn't have touched the mirror," it whispered. "Now we share the same face." Emily slashed at it with the knife. The blade passed right through, leaving behind only a wisp of shadow and a stench of burned air. The figure flickered and vanished, but its voice lingered. "It was never just the house. It's what's buried beneath it." Her knees buckled. She dropped the knife, pressing her hands to her ears, but the whispers returned. Not from the walls this time, but from inside her own head. Visions flooded her mind, flashes of a basement she didn't know existed, a trapdoor hidden beneath the old rug in the living room, chains, symbols, a ritual, people chanting her name. Emily gasped and stumbled back. No, this isn't real." The whispers hissed in unison. "It is." Her eyes darted toward the living room. The rug lay in the center of the floor, old and faded, edges curled upward like something had been moving beneath it. The moment she looked at it, the air seemed to thicken, pressing against her lungs. She took one slow step forward, then another. Her mind screamed to stop, but her body kept moving. She reached the rug and grabbed one corner, yanking it back. The smell hit her instantly. Damp wood, rot, and something metallic. Beneath the rug, half hidden under dust, was a wooden door set into the floor. A trapdoor, and carved into it. The same symbols that had been on the music box. Emily's hand shook as she reached for the handle. It was cold, like touching the edge of a grave. The whispers swelled again, overlapping, louder, desperate. "Don't open it. Don't open it. You'll let him out." But beneath the chorus of fear, one voice, calm, low, the same voice that had haunted her all night, whispered softly. "He's already out, Emily. You're just coming home." The trapdoor creaked. Slowly, it began to open, and from the darkness below, something breathed. For a moment, the world stopped breathing. The darkness below the trapdoor didn't look like normal darkness. It was thicker, like smoke that couldn't rise. It pulsed faintly, as if something inside was waiting for the air above to come down and feed it. Emily stared into it, frozen halfway between curiosity and terror. one trembling hand still gripping the edge of the open door. A smell crept out first. Wet soil, cold metal. A hint of something sweet and wrong, like fruit that had rotted years ago but still clung to a ghost of perfume. She gagged and pulled her sweater sleeve over her nose, but it didn't help. The air itself seemed to crawl down her throat. Somewhere under her, she heard the faint sound of water dripping. Plink, plink, plink. And beneath that, softer, like breath through teeth, came the sound of whispering. "Come down, Emily." She jerked back, clutching her flashlight. But the words weren't echoing through the room, they were echoing inside her skull. Her hands trembled violently, and yet she couldn't make herself close the door. The pull was magnetic, the same sick curiosity that makes people stare into an abyss and wonder how far down it goes. She found herself lowering the flashlight, aiming it into the hole. The beam caught wooden steps leading downward. Old, narrow, uneven. The kind that creaked under the weight of time itself. Beyond the first few, the light faded into a fog so thick it looked alive. Every part of her screamed not to go down there. Every instinct begged her to run out the front door, into the cold night, to anyone, anywhere. But something in her chest, a strange aching pressure, kept whispering that there was no escape until she looked. So she stepped onto the first stair. It groaned under her weight. The sound echoed unnaturally long, bouncing through the basement like the walls were breathing. She descended slowly, one hand trailing along the damp wall. Her flashlight flickered, the battery fading, and every time the beam dimmed, she thought she saw movement at the edge of the light. A shoulder, a hand, a face pressed close to the wall watching her. Halfway down, the whispering returned. But now it wasn't words. It was chanting. Low, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Each breath she took fell into rhythm with it, until she couldn't tell which was hers and which belonged to the sound. Her vision blurred at the edges. Her skin crawled. When she reached the bottom step, her foot sank into mud. The floor wasn't solid. It was wet earth. The basement walls weren't brick but stone, black with mold and carved with the same looping symbols she had seen before. They spiraled everywhere, etched deep and rough, like someone had done it with shaking hands. Her flashlight caught movement. Something was scrawled across the far wall in long, smeared strokes. She walked closer, squinting through the dim light. It wasn't paint. It was writing. Old, desperate writing in dark red. She let him in. She became the door. Emily's knees went weak. She stumbled backward, tripping on something buried in the mud. When she turned to see what it was, she screamed. A hand. Human. Pale. The skin shriveled and gray, the fingernails blackened and long. It stuck out of the dirt like it had been clawing its way up and lost. Emily stumbled away, but as she did, her flashlight flickered and illuminated more shapes, more hands, dozens, some small, some large, all frozen mid-reach, like a crowd of the dead stretching toward her. Her breath hitched. Oh God, oh God. Then she heard footsteps, slow, heavy, from behind her. She turned, raising the dying flashlight. The beam caught the wooden stairs she'd just come down, but they were empty. Still, the sound kept coming. A step, then another. Closer. The steps didn't match the weight of a person. They were too slow, too deliberate, as though something was pressing its weight into the wood on purpose. The whispering rose again, louder now, spilling from the walls. The voices overlapped until they became one voice. Deep, male. You open the door. Now finish what she started. Who? She whispered. Who started what? Your mother. Emily froze. The word hit her like a slap. No, my mother's not. She was the first door. The voice came from everywhere. It crawled through her ears and down her spine. She turned in a slow circle, heart pounding. The air had changed. The fog that hung around her ankles had thickened, swirling as though moved by invisible hands. In the center of the room, something began to take shape. A figure. It rose from the earth itself, tall and thin, its skin the same color as the basement walls. The shape was wrong again, limbs too long, joints bending the wrong way. Its face was stretched smooth, eyes deep hollows. But as it turned toward her, a flicker of something familiar passed through it. Like her mother's face flashed beneath the gray skin for a single second. "Mom?" she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "Mom." The figure's head snapped toward her, and a sound tore through the room. Not quite a scream, not quite a roar, but something between the two. The ground shook, dust falling from the ceiling. Emily stumbled backward, falling against the wall. Her flashlight went out completely, plunging her into pitch black. The whispers changed again. No longer pleading. Now they were chanting her name. Emily. 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 The sound came from inside her head and all around her at once. The figure moved closer. She could hear its breathing now, slow, rattling like someone trying to remember how lungs worked. The smell of damp earth and old blood filled her mouth. Something brushed her hair. She screamed and swung blindly with her fists, connecting with nothing. She hit the wall hard and felt something crack beneath her palm. The stone shifted slightly, and a faint glow appeared from a narrow opening. She turned toward it. The light was faint, flickering, like candlelight. She crawled toward it through the mud, shoving the stones aside until the gap widened enough to see inside. It was a small chamber, a hidden one, lined with more symbols. In the middle stood a stone altar, and on it, an old leather-bound book covered in dust. The book pulsed faintly with the same dull red glow as the symbols on the walls. Emily reached for it, desperate for something. Answers, hope, anything. The moment her fingers touched the cover, pain exploded through her skull. Images flooded her mind again. Not hers. Memories that weren't hers. A woman kneeling in this very basement years ago. A circle drawn in blood. Candles flickering as she whispered an ancient name. A shadow forming behind her, rising taller and taller. And the woman's face, Emily's mother's face, tear-streaked, terrified, whispering the same words over and over. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to let you in." The vision shattered. Emily fell back, gasping, clutching her head. The whispers around her were hysterical now, screaming, begging, laughing all at once. The book slid off the altar and hit the ground with a wet thud. Its pages opened on their own, flipping furiously until they stopped on one. A drawing covered the page. A doorway carved into the shape of a woman's body. And beneath it, scrawled in red ink, "Blood opens what blood has sealed." Emily's eyes widened. She realized what the whispers had meant all along. Her mother had sealed something down here, something that was never meant to wake up. And when Emily opened that trapdoor, she hadn't just broken the seal. She had inherited it. From behind her, a voice whispered one last time. Quiet, almost gentle now. "Now you're the door." The earth beneath her shifted. The floorboards above groaned. The house itself seemed to sigh. Then, from the top of the stairs came a sound she would never forget. 3 slow, heavy knocks. Knock, knock, knock. And the whisper that followed wasn't inside her head this time. It came from the floor above, clear and cold. "Emily, let me in." The storm outside hadn't stopped. If anything, it had grown angrier, slamming sheets of icy rain against the windows as if trying to break its way in. Ethan sat huddled on the floor of the living room, staring at the flickering fireplace he had managed to light. The flames danced wildly, casting grotesque shadows across the walls, shadows that didn't always move the way they should. He could swear that sometimes, even when the fire was still, the shadows twitched on their own. His phone was dead. The power was gone. And somewhere deep inside the house, something was moving. It had been nearly 3 hours since he'd seen the woman. The apparition, her pale, trembling face reflected in the old mirror, still haunted his mind. Every time he blinked, he saw her milky eyes staring back at him, the corners of her mouth pulled into a faint, trembling smile that made his skin crawl. He thought about leaving. but the storm had turned the roads into black rivers. The front door wouldn't budge. It was as though it had swollen shut with the humidity, and the windows refused to open. He was trapped inside his own home. Then came the first whisper. At first, Ethan thought it was the wind, but no, it came from inside the house. A faint, shaky voice echoed through the hallway. "Ethan?" He froze, his heart hammering in his chest. He turned toward the sound, every nerve in his body screaming for him to move, to hide. But curiosity, that cursed human weakness, made him stand. He took the flashlight from the coffee table and aimed it toward the staircase. The beam trembled as his hand shook violently. "Ethan?" The voice came again, softer, closer. He took a step forward. "Who's there?" His voice came out hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Hello?" No reply. He walked slowly up the staircase, the old wood creaking beneath his bare feet. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing dust dancing in the air like tiny spirits. His breath misted in the cold. Each step felt heavier than the last. Halfway up, he heard the whisper again. But this time, it wasn't calling his name. It was singing. A childlike hum drifted through the hallway above him, a soft, eerie melody that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. It was the same tune his mother used to hum when he was a child to help him sleep during thunderstorms. He froze. That song was buried in his memory, long forgotten. How could anyone else know it? "Stop," he whispered to himself, clutching the flashlight tighter. "It's not real, it's just the wind." But deep down, he knew the wind didn't hum lullabies. He reached the top of the stairs and turned the corner toward the master bedroom. The door was slightly open, creaking back and forth as if beckoning him in. The singing grew louder, gentle, almost soothing, but underneath it there was something wrong. The pitch wavered, like a broken record struggling to play a tune it didn't quite remember. Ethan slowly pushed the door open. The room was empty. The curtains fluttered from the open window, letting in the icy rain. The bed was unmade. The fireplace in the corner was cold and dark. But the song continued, though there was no one there. He turned his light toward the mirror on the far wall and his stomach dropped. The reflection showed a woman standing right behind him. Ethan spun around, but the room was empty. When he looked back at the mirror, she was still there, closer this time, her hollow eyes fixed on his. She lifted her hand and placed it against the glass, her mouth moving silently. The flashlight slipped from Ethan's grasp and clattered to the floor. The room plunged into darkness. He scrambled to pick it up, but as he did, the singing stopped. Silence swallowed the room. He felt a hand, cold and clammy, brush against the back of his neck. He spun around and shined the light wildly, panting. Nothing. Then, faintly, he heard the sound of scratching. It was coming from inside the walls. Slow, deliberate scratches. Something or someone was crawling through the narrow spaces between the plaster and wood. The noise grew louder, faster, until it seemed to echo from every direction. The walls trembled. Paint cracked and flaked. Ethan backed toward the door, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The scratching stopped all at once, replaced by a voice, muffled, distorted, whispering from behind the wall. "Let me in." He bolted out of the room, slamming the door behind him. His footsteps pounded down the stairs as he sprinted toward the living room. His flashlight flickered again, once, twice, and then went out. He was plunged into total blackness. The only light came from the fireplace, but even that looked wrong. The flames now burned a deep, unnatural blue. They hissed and twisted like living things. And in the flickering light, Ethan saw something that froze him in place. There were footprints leading from the fireplace across the room, wet, muddy footprints that stopped just a few feet from where he stood. He followed them with his eyes, his heart pounding. They stopped right at his feet. He felt something wet drip onto his shoulder. He looked up. Above him on the ceiling hung the woman. Her long, dark hair dangled downward like ropes, and her eyes glowed faintly in the firelight. Her mouth twisted into that same trembling smile as she whispered, "You came back." Ethan screamed and stumbled backward. The figure dropped to the floor with a sickening thud, landing on all fours. Her head twitched, her limbs moving with jerky, unnatural motions as she began crawling toward him. He grabbed the nearest thing, a fire poker, and swung wildly. It passed through her like smoke, leaving behind a trail of freezing air. She laughed, the sound distorted and inhuman. "Get out," Ethan yelled, his voice breaking. "What do you want from me?" Her laughter died down, replaced by a whisper so soft it felt like it came from inside his head. "You know who I am." Ethan froze. He shook his head violently. No, I don't." The woman leaned forward until her face was inches from his. "You left me here," she hissed. "You promised you'd never leave." Ethan's blood ran cold. The memories came flooding back. His childhood, the house, the accident, the sound of his little sister's scream as the old fireplace collapsed, the way his parents never spoke of it again, the way they moved out, leaving everything behind. The house had been rebuilt, but her room, the old playroom upstairs, had never been touched. Ethan realized with a sickening dread that the whisper in the walls wasn't new. It had always been there. He just hadn't been around to hear it. The woman's face melted away, revealing a pale, childlike form beneath. Her eyes glowed faintly as she whispered, "You forgot me, Ethan." And then she lunged. Ethan barely had time to react. The cold slammed into him like a wave. He gasped, collapsing to the floor as the air left his lungs. The fire roared higher, crackling blue and white. The walls shook, and the old clock on the mantel shattered. Then, silence. When Ethan opened his eyes, the room was empty again. The fire was out. The footprints were gone. But carved into the wooden floor beside him, written in jagged letters, were two chilling words. "I'm home." And from deep inside the walls, the whisper began again, soft, steady, and closer than ever. "Ethan." The house was silent again, eerily, impossibly silent. Ethan stood in the middle of the darkened living room, shaking, drenched in cold sweat. The words carved into the wooden floor still glistened faintly under the dying light of the fire. "I'm home." He couldn't look at them anymore. Every time he did, he felt something stir inside his chest, something heavy and familiar, like guilt that had never truly died. His flashlight was gone. The batteries in his phone were long dead. The air was cold, thick and heavy with the scent of damp wood and decay. Outside, the storm raged on, lightning flashing across the windows like jagged cracks in the night. He stumbled toward the kitchen, desperate for something, anything that made sense. He turned on the faucet. Nothing came out. He opened the refrigerator. The light flickered, then went out. Everything inside was covered in a thin layer of frost, as though the cold had seeped into every corner of the house. As he turned, he noticed something strange on the far wall. Faint fingerprints smeared across the paint. Small ones. Children's fingerprints. They led out of the kitchen and toward the staircase again. Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "Not again." But the house had already chosen for him. The footprints waited, leading him back upstairs. He climbed slowly, his legs trembling, his breath fogging in front of him. Every step creaked like a scream beneath his feet. The shadows on the walls seemed to lean toward him, twisting into faces that disappeared when he blinked. He could hear something faint behind the plaster again, scratching, tapping, a low whisper. It wasn't a single voice anymore. There were two. When he reached the top, he saw that one door at the end of the hallway, the one that had always been sealed shut since his childhood, was now wide open. It was his sister Lily's old playroom. The air that drifted out was icy cold, almost freezing. It carried a smell he hadn't sensed in years, a mix of dust, old wood, and something faintly sweet. like the scent of lilies, her favorite flowers. Ethan stood in the doorway for a long time, unable to step inside. The memories came rushing back. Lily's laughter, her small hands clutching his as they built forts out of blankets, the way she'd beg him to stay with her when thunderstorms scared her. And then the day it all ended, the day the fireplace collapsed, the day she screamed, and he ran. He had been only 12. He hadn't meant to leave her. But when the fire started, he'd panicked, bolting out into the storm. By the time his parents pulled her out from the debris, it was too late. She'd been gone, and though his parents told him it wasn't his fault, he could still see the look in their eyes, the quiet resentment, the unspoken blame. Now, standing in that doorway, it felt as though time had never moved at all. The room looked untouched, like a photograph frozen in time. The little wooden rocking horse still stood by the window. The dollhouse sat on the rug, covered in a thin layer of dust. Her drawings were still pinned to the walls, faded but visible. Scribbled pictures of flowers, animals, and a small house with 2 stick figures holding hands. Ethan stepped inside. The air was colder here than anywhere else. Each breath burned in his lungs. His footsteps echoed unnaturally as though the room were much larger than it should have been. He knelt beside the dollhouse, brushing dust from its roof. The tiny front door creaked open by itself. Inside, the miniature rooms were furnished perfectly. Tiny chairs, beds, and even little mirrors. But when he looked closely, he saw that inside one of the miniature rooms, there was a tiny figure, a small porcelain doll with black hair and cracked cheeks. Its eyes were missing, replaced by empty hollow sockets. The doll's mouth was open, frozen in a silent scream. Suddenly, the door behind Ethan slammed shut. The sound echoed through the house like thunder. He jumped up, spinning around, but the door wouldn't open. He banged on it, shouting, "Hello? Is anyone there?" No answer, only the whispering. It began softly, like a lullaby. Then it grew louder, spreading through the room, overlapping voices, children's laughter and crying all mixed together. The walls began to shudder. The drawings on the walls peeled and fell to the floor one by one. He turned back to the dollhouse and froze. The tiny rooms inside were changing. The dollhouse was no longer just a toy. Its walls were now flickering with moving shadows. Inside, Ethan could see miniature versions of himself walking through the living room, the kitchen, the stairs. It was his house. Every room, every detail, exact. And inside the dollhouse version of the living room, he could see a small, ghostly figure standing by the fireplace. "Lily," he whispered. The doll's head turned toward him. Its jaw moved, and though no sound came out, Ethan heard her voice echo inside his head. "You left me here, Ethan?" He stumbled backward, shaking his head. "No, I didn't. I tried to help you, The dollhouse began to tremble violently. The walls cracked, and the tiny furniture toppled over. Then, with a deafening snap, the dollhouse split open. From inside, a thick black mist poured out, swirling around Ethan's legs. The air filled with the stench of burning wood. The whispers grew louder, almost screaming now. And through the darkness, the faint outline of a small girl appeared. Her skin pale, her hair singed at the ends, her eyes glowing like dying embers. Lily. She stood only a few feet away, staring at him with that same trembling smile he'd seen on the woman earlier. Only now he understood. The woman in the mirror wasn't someone else. It had always been her. His sister, trapped, growing older in the darkness, becoming something else. "Lily," Ethan whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry." But her expression didn't change. Her head tilted to one side. "You said you'd stay," she whispered. "You promised." He took a step forward, trembling. "I didn't mean to." The floor cracked beneath his feet, splitting open with a violent boom. The room twisted, the walls stretching like melting wax. The sound of a child's laughter filled the air, but it was distorted, unnatural. Ethan stumbled backward as the floorboards split apart, revealing something beneath them, a staircase leading down into complete darkness. From that abyss, cold air rose up, carrying the faint sound of whispering, hundreds of voices overlapping, calling his name in different tones. Ethan. Ethan. Come home. Lily's pale hand reached out, pointing toward the hole. You can still stay, she whispered. Down there. With me. Ethan backed away, shaking his head, but the ground tilted beneath him. He lost his balance, falling toward the opening. Just before he plunged into the darkness, he grabbed onto the edge of the floorboards, his fingers scraping against splinters. He dangled over the void, his heart pounding so hard he could barely breathe. Below him he saw faint, flickering lights, like candles burning in the dark. And in those lights, faces began to appear, dozens of them. Children, pale, lifeless, watching him silently. Their lips moved in unison. Stay, Ethan screamed, pulling himself up with all his strength. As he did, something cold grabbed his ankle and yanked. He kicked wildly, shouting, No, let go. His foot struck something solid. There was a scream, high-pitched, unnatural, and suddenly the grip loosened. He crawled away from the hole just as the floorboards slammed shut, sealing it completely. The room went quiet again. Ethan lay there on the cold floor, shaking, gasping for air. And then from somewhere behind him he heard a child's voice whisper softly, almost kindly. You can't leave, Ethan. The house remembers. The air grew colder. The lights flickered again. And for the first time Ethan realized the truth. The house wasn't haunted by his sister. It was haunted by every child who had ever lived here. Children who had vanished, their souls swallowed by the place long before him. And he had just opened the door for them to come back. The storm had quieted to a dull murmur by the time Ethan stumbled out of Lily's room. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot, and his hands trembled violently. The house was breathing now. He could hear it. The floors creaked like ribs expanding and contracting, the air wheezing through unseen cracks as if the very walls were alive. He could no longer tell if it was exhaustion or madness clouding his mind, but everything felt distorted. The hallways looked longer, darker, unfamiliar. The wallpaper rippled as though something beneath it was moving, crawling, and behind every corner, he felt her, them, watching. His thoughts blurred as he made his way downstairs. He needed to get out. He had to leave before the storm ended, before the night was over. He didn't know what sunrise meant for this house, but deep down, some primal instinct whispered that if he was still here when the morning came, he'd never see daylight again. He reached the front door and twisted the knob. It didn't move. He slammed his shoulder against it. Once, twice, again. Nothing. It was as if the wood itself had fused with the frame. He grabbed a chair and swung it at the window. Glass shattered, but instead of air rushing in, there was nothing. Beyond the broken glass was pitch-black emptiness, an endless void that swallowed the shards mid-air. He stepped back, gasping. What the hell is this? Then he heard it. Footsteps. Soft, slow, deliberate, descending the staircase behind him. Ethan turned around, his pulse pounding in his ears. On the stairs stood Lily, but she wasn't alone this time. Behind her were others, children, all pale and hollow-eyed, their faces twisted into blank, lifeless expressions. Some were burned, some were bruised, some looked half-faded, like smoke trapped in human form. They were all watching him. Lily stepped forward, her voice echoing in the silence. You opened the way, Ethan. You let us out. He stumbled backward, shaking his head. I didn't mean to. I didn't. You promised, she whispered. You said you'd stay with me, but you left, just like they all did. Lily, please. Ethan's voice cracked. I was a kid. I didn't know what to do. I was scared. Her eyes flickered, part human, part something else. You should have been scared for me. The lights flickered violently. bursting one by one as the temperature dropped. Frost spread across the windows and floorboards. The air turned to mist. Ethan's breath came out in sharp clouds as he stumbled back toward the fireplace. Suddenly the flames roared back to life, but not red. The fire burned black and blue, the flames hissing and twisting upward like serpents. Inside the fire, Ethan could see images, memories, children playing, families laughing, birthday candles, then screams, fire, darkness, and a house, always standing, always waiting. Lily's voice cut through the roar of the flames. It never ends, Ethan. The house remembers every soul that enters. It keeps us. It feeds on us. Ethan shook his head violently. No, this isn't real. You're not real. But then the floor beneath his feet shuddered, the walls splitting open like wounds. From the cracks poured that same thick black mist. It crawled up his legs, cold and heavy like liquid shadow. And from within it came voices, whispering, chanting his name. Ethan, stay. Ethan, forever. He fell to his knees, clawing at the mist as if he could rip it off. The more he fought, the tighter it clung to him. His vision blurred. For a second, he thought he saw his parents, standing in the corner of the room, pale and ghostly, their eyes hollow. His mother's voice broke through the noise, gentle and soft. You shouldn't have come back, sweetheart. Mom? His heart clenched. I didn't know. I wanted to see home again. This isn't home, she said, her voice trembling. It never was. The house groaned, deep and thunderous, shaking dust from the ceiling. The children began to fade, one by one, their outlines flickering like candlelight. Only Lily remained, standing at the edge of the fire, her eyes glistening with something that almost looked like sadness. Lily, please, Ethan whispered, crawling toward her. Tell me what I have to do. How do I make this stop? She tilted her head. You can't stop it, Ethan. The house wants one thing, a soul to stay. That's how it survives. That's how it keeps the rest asleep. He stared at her in disbelief. You mean, I have to stay here? She nodded slowly. Someone always has to. The realization hit him like a knife. That was the reason the haunting never spread beyond the property. The reason the town had forgotten this place existed. Every time someone entered, the house claimed them. It sealed itself again, waiting for the next. No, Ethan said, standing up, his voice trembling. I won't be your prisoner. Lily's smile faded. Then they will all wake. As she said it, the walls began to crack open further, and the black mist surged out, forming shapes, faces, hundreds of them, screaming silently. The air filled with the sound of breaking glass, cracking wood, and shrill laughter that didn't sound human. Ethan stumbled backward, tripping over the rug. His hand brushed against something, metal, the fire poker. He grabbed it, eyes wide, staring at the black flames in the fireplace. Maybe the house fed on fear, on life, but maybe fire could destroy it. Maybe if he burned it all down, the cycle would end. He lunged toward the flames, plunging the poker deep into the heart of the fire. There was a deafening scream, not from Lily, not from the ghosts, but from the house itself. The walls buckled, the floorboards cracked open, the ceiling split apart, raining dust and debris. The fire exploded outward, a storm of black light. Ethan was thrown backward, slamming into the wall. Everything was chaos. The whispers turned into shrieks, the air burned, the world dissolved into color and noise. And then, silence. When Ethan opened his eyes, he was lying outside. The sky was gray, the storm gone. The house stood before him, smoke rising from its windows, its roof partially collapsed. It looked smaller now, older, defeated. He pushed himself up slowly, his body aching. For the first time in hours, maybe days, he could hear nothing but the wind. No whispers, no voices, just silence. He turned toward the trees and started walking. Each step felt heavier, like his body didn't belong to him anymore. When he reached the edge of the property, he turned back one last time. The house stood still, its charred frame silhouetted against the pale morning light. And in the upstairs window, he saw her, Lily, smiling. He froze. She raised her hand and waved gently, the same way she used to when he left for school. Then she turned and disappeared into the shadows. Ethan felt something inside his chest twist. He looked down and saw his reflection in a puddle near his feet. His skin looked pale, too pale. His eyes, faintly gray. He gasped, stumbling backward. No, this can't. The wind picked up again, carrying with it a faint whisper. Someone always has to stay. And as the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, the door of the ruined house creaked open by itself. Ethan turned toward the road, ready to run, but then stopped. His feet wouldn't move. His body wouldn't obey. He felt the ground beneath him soften, the world tilting slightly, as though gravity itself were pulling him backward. The whisper grew louder, closer. "Welcome home, Ethan." He tried to scream, but his voice was gone. The world around him dissolved into gray mist, and the last thing he saw before everything faded was the house rebuilding itself, brick by brick, window by window, standing whole again, as if nothing had ever happened. And in the living room, reflected faintly in the mirror above the fireplace, a new shadow appeared. A man, standing alone, watching, waiting. Ethan had become the house's new keeper. And from that night on, the old house on Raven Hill stood quiet again, peaceful, abandoned, waiting for its next visitor. But sometimes, when storms roll over the valley and lightning flashes across the windows, neighbors swear they can see a man standing in the window, staring out into the rain. And if you ever get close enough, if you dare to listen carefully through the howling wind, you might just hear it. Soft, distant, and chilling. Welcome home. What if I told you there's a castle in the middle of nowhere that moves on its own? Walls shifting, rooms changing places, and whispers echoing from people who were never alive. Would you dare to step inside if the gate opened for you, on its own? The fog came first, thick, heavy, and unnaturally cold. It rolled across the deserted countryside like a living creature, swallowing the moonlight until everything became a shade of silver gray. Somewhere within that fog stood Blackthorn Castle, a fortress forgotten by time, hidden from every map, and avoided by every living soul within 50 miles. Eleanor Hart had heard the stories. Everyone in the nearby town of Ravenshade spoke of the castle as if it were a living being, a predator that waited patiently for the curious and the foolish. But Eleanor wasn't the type to believe in ghosts. She was a historian, rational and precise, driven by facts. And according to her research, the castle had once belonged to the Ashbourne family, a noble line that vanished without a trace in 1892. No deaths recorded, no graves found, just gone. That's what drew her here tonight. She parked her Jeep on the muddy path, grabbed her flashlight, and stared at the colossal silhouette looming through the mist. The structure looked impossibly vast, as if the earth itself had birthed it. Its towers were jagged like broken teeth, and the faint outline of arched windows glimmered with reflected moonlight. She approached slowly, her boots crunching on wet gravel. The air smelled of stone, moss, and something else. Something faintly metallic. Blood, perhaps. Or rust. She tried not to think about it. Just another old ruin, she whispered to herself, though her voice trembled slightly. Just another ruin. Then she saw it. The front gate. 2 iron doors, 12 feet tall, chained shut by thick corroded links. Yet as she drew near, the chains rattled once, then fell to the ground with a clang. Eleanor froze. The gate slowly creaked open on its own, the hinges groaning like an ancient animal waking from slumber. Her heart raced. The air seemed to tighten around her chest, heavy, and oppressive. She could turn back now. She should turn back now. But her curiosity, the same force that made her travel across the country chasing historical myths, pushed her forward. She stepped inside. The courtyard was a sea of decay. Statues leaned at odd angles, their faces eroded by centuries of rain. The fountain at the center dripped a slow, rhythmic pattern, though the water was dark and thick like ink. As she shone her flashlight around, she noticed footprints in the mud, fresh ones. She crouched. The prints were large, boot-shaped, and recent. But the soil was too wet for them to remain long. Someone had walked through here less than an hour ago. Eleanor's breath hitched. "Is someone here?" she called out. Her voice bounced off the courtyard walls, echoing faintly back. Except the echo came a second too late, as though something were repeating her words from deep inside the castle. "Someone here," it whispered back, faint but distinct. Eleanor's stomach twisted. She turned her flashlight toward the main doors. One was ajar, revealing darkness beyond. She hesitated only a moment before stepping inside. The great hall was magnificent, even in ruin. Dust-covered chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, and faded banners still bore the Ashbourne crest, a black raven clutching a sword. Every sound she made echoed through the vast emptiness. Her flashlight beam caught portraits on the walls, stern faces staring down at her with eyes too lifelike for comfort. She paused before one painting, a man in his 40s with piercing gray eyes and a faint scar across his cheek. The plaque beneath read, "Lord Edgar Ashbourne, 1888. Something about his expression unsettled her. His gaze seemed to follow her wherever she moved. "Trick of the light," she muttered. But as she turned to walk away, she heard it. A faint scrape behind her, like fabric moving across wood. She spun around. The portrait had changed. Lord Ashbourne's head was now slightly tilted, and his lips were curved into the faintest smile. Eleanor stumbled back, her flashlight flickering. Her mind tried to rationalize it. Paintings could warp, shadows could play tricks. But deep down, she knew what she saw was real. Suddenly, a door slammed somewhere upstairs. The sound echoed down the hall, followed by slow, deliberate footsteps. Thump, thump, thump. Eleanor's heart pounded. "Hello?" she called out. "Is someone there?" No response, just the steady rhythm of footsteps descending the staircase at the far end of the hall. She raised her light. The beam caught a glimpse of something, a figure in a dark coat, half hidden by shadow. "Who's there?" she demanded. The figure stopped. Silence filled the hall. Then, in a low voice, it whispered, "You shouldn't have come." Eleanor froze. When she blinked, the figure was gone. She tried to calm herself. Her flashlight trembled in her hand. Maybe it was a squatter. Maybe someone else had come here for the same reason she did. She moved toward the grand staircase, forcing her breathing to steady. As she ascended, she noticed portraits lining the stairwell, each depicting members of the Ashbourne family. Only now, every face was turned toward her. Every single one. The second-floor corridor was long and narrow, lined with closed doors. The air smelled stronger here, mold mixed with something like old perfume. She opened the first door on the left. Inside was a study filled with rotted books and collapsed shelves. Papers littered the floor, some still legible. She picked one up. It was a diary page dated 1892. "The whispers grow louder each night. Edgar says it's only the wind, but I see the faces in the walls. I fear the castle is waking." Eleanor's pulse quickened. She stuffed the page into her pocket. She moved on, entering another room. A bedroom this time. The four-poster bed was covered in dust, but the sheets were disturbed, as if someone had recently sat there. On the vanity lay a cracked mirror. Eleanor wiped the surface clean with her sleeve and gasped. In the reflection, she saw not her own face, but a woman standing behind her. Pale skin, hollow eyes, mouth sewn shut with black thread. Eleanor spun around. No one there. She looked back at the mirror. The woman was closer now, her stitched mouth trembling as if trying to speak. Then the thread snapped. The woman's jaw fell open, and from her mouth came a voice that wasn't human, deep, layered, like 1,000 whispers overlapping. Leave before it opens again. The mirror shattered. Eleanor stumbled back, cutting her hand on the glass. She bolted out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Her breathing was ragged now. She needed to leave. Whatever this place was, it wasn't abandoned. It was alive. She hurried down the corridor toward the staircase, only to stop dead in her tracks. The stairs were gone. In their place was a solid stone wall. She turned back. The hallway behind her was different now, longer, darker, lined with new doors that hadn't been there before. The castle had changed. Panic surged through her veins. She tried one of the doors. It opened into a narrow passage lit by faint candlelight. She followed it, desperate for any way out. The passage twisted like a labyrinth, the walls seeming to breathe around her. Whispers followed her steps, low and indistinct, rising and falling like a chant. She turned a corner and froze. At the end of the corridor stood the same figure she'd seen earlier, the man in the dark coat. He was holding something, an old lantern that flickered with pale light. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking. The man lifted his head slowly. His face was pale, eyes empty, lips cracked. "I tried to warn you," he said softly. "But now, you're part of it too." Eleanor took a step back. Part of what? He raised a trembling hand and pointed behind her. She turned and saw the main gate of the castle slam shut, sealing her inside. The man whispered, "The castle chooses who it keeps." Then the candles blew out. For a long moment, Eleanor stood in pitch-black silence. The air was so thick and still that she could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Her flashlight flickered weakly in her trembling hand, then went out completely. She was swallowed by darkness, an endless, suffocating void that seemed to pulse and breathe around her. The smell of damp stone and decayed wood filled her nose, along with something faintly sweet and rotten, like flowers left too long in a grave. She took one hesitant step forward, her palm brushing along the cold wall, searching for an edge or a door, anything that could lead her out of this nightmare. The stone felt uneven beneath her fingertips, almost warm in certain spots, as though something beneath the surface was alive. Then she felt it, a faint vibration, like the slow, steady rhythm of a heartbeat pulsing through the wall itself. She yanked her hand away with a gasp. Somewhere ahead, a faint light appeared, a single candle flame flickering at the far end of the corridor. Desperate for any sign of escape, Eleanor stumbled toward it. The light swayed as she approached, as if carried by an unseen hand, drawing her deeper into the labyrinth of shifting halls. When she finally reached it, she realized it wasn't just one candle. There were dozens, hundreds, lining the walls of a vast circular chamber. The ceiling arched impossibly high above her, lost in shadow, and everywhere she looked were shelves, towering wooden shelves crammed with books that looked older than the castle itself. The Library of the Lost, she thought. The name came unbidden to her mind, as though whispered by someone standing right beside her ear. Eleanor took a cautious step inside, her boots echoing on the marble floor. The air here was warmer, heavy with the scent of old paper and something darker, metallic, like dried blood. The books were bound in cracked leather, many titles faded beyond recognition. She brushed dust from one and read aloud. The Lineage of Shadows, 1604. Another bore the title, Echoes Beyond the Grave. She felt a shiver crawl up her spine. These weren't history books, they were records of people. As she moved deeper, she noticed something even stranger. The books had names on their spines. Not authors, but single names. Margaret Wills, Thomas Reed, Eleanor Hart. She froze. Her name was there, written in faded ink on the spine of a thick, crimson-bound volume. Her hands trembled as she reached for it, but before she could touch the book, a deep, resonant sound echoed through the room like a door slamming somewhere far away. Then a voice, a whisper that came from everywhere and nowhere at once. He wrote them all, every soul the castle takes. Eleanor spun around. No one was there. The candles flickered violently, and a cold wind swept through the chamber, though no window or door was open. "Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling. No answer, only the faint rustle of pages turning on their own. Then, from the far side of the library, she saw him again. The same man with the lantern. He stood between two shelves, watching her silently. This time, she saw him more clearly. His coat was tattered and soaked near the hem, his face drawn and pale. But his eyes, they were filled with sorrow, not malice. "Please," she said, taking a step toward him. "I don't understand. What is this place? Why is my name here?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned and gestured for her to follow. Against every instinct screaming for her to run the other way, Eleanor obeyed. She followed him through narrow aisles of books, past shelves that seemed to stretch into infinity. The deeper they went, the quieter everything became, until even her own footsteps sounded distant, muffled, as though she were walking underwater. Finally, the man stopped before a table at the center of the library. On it lay an open book, larger than any she'd ever seen. Its pages were filled with tiny handwriting that pulsed faintly, as though written in living ink. The handwriting shifted and twisted before her eyes, changing shape whenever she tried to focus on a single word. The man spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is the Chronicle. It writes the stories of everyone who enters the castle. Once your name appears, your fate is sealed." Eleanor stared at the moving text. "That's impossible. Who writes it?" "The castle does," he replied softly. "It remembers, it hungers, and it writes to keep what it takes." She shook her head, backing away. "No, I don't believe that. There's always an explanation, some mechanism, some trick." "Then explain this," he said, and pointed to the book again. She looked. A new line had appeared, fresh, wet ink, forming words before her eyes. Eleanor Hart looked upon the Chronicle and denied the truth. She took one step back, unaware of the shadow behind her. Her heart lurched. She turned sharply and nearly screamed. Behind her stood a woman in a tattered black gown, her hair hanging in wet strands over a hollow corpse-like face. Her skin glistened as though soaked in oil, and her eyes, what remained of them, were black pits that swallowed the candlelight. The air grew icy. Eleanor stumbled backward, but the woman didn't move closer. Instead, she raised a skeletal hand and pointed toward one of the shelves. The books on that shelf began to tremble violently, one by one falling to the ground, pages flapping open. From within their pages came faint whispers, voices calling out in pain, fear, and pleading. "Help me. Don't let it write me again. It hurts to remember." Eleanor covered her ears, backing toward the door. The man with the lantern reached out a hand. "Don't run," he said sharply. "If you run, it will follow. If you look away, it will change the halls again." "What do you mean?" she cried. "What is it?" He lowered his head. "The castle's heart. It hides in its own stories." The ghostly woman turned her head toward them, the sound of bones creaking with every motion. The lantern light flickered wildly, casting distorted shadows across the walls. Eleanor's breath came fast and shallow. She grabbed the nearest thing she could, a candle holder, and hurled it toward the apparition. It passed through her, shattering against the wall. The ghost screamed, not a human sound, but something deep and resonant that shook the very floor beneath them. The shelves began to collapse, one after another, in a deafening chain reaction. Books flew from their places like birds escaping cages. Pages tore through the air like leaves in a storm. "Run!" the man shouted. They sprinted together through the chaos, dodging falling debris as the entire library seemed to convulse. The door ahead loomed like salvation, and Eleanor threw herself through it just as the room behind them imploded in a thunderous roar. When she opened her eyes, they were back in another corridor. The man leaned against the wall, breathing heavily, his lantern flickering low. Eleanor wiped sweat and dust from her face. "Who are you?" she demanded. "You keep showing up. Why are you helping me?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Because I couldn't save the others," he said quietly. "And because I was once like you, a visitor. I came here in 1923, searching for truth. The castle never let me leave." Her eyes widened. "You've been trapped here for 100 years?" He nodded slowly. "Time doesn't move here. It bends. It feeds." Eleanor's knees went weak. She leaned against the wall for support, trying to make sense of the impossible. "There has to be a way out," she whispered. "There is," he said, his voice low. "But it's in the heart of the castle, where it keeps its oldest memory. The Ashbournes built this place to contain something far worse than death." Before she could respond, a sound echoed down the hall, a distant creak like a massive door opening somewhere deep within the castle. A cold wind swept past them, carrying with it the faint sound of a woman's laughter. The man's face went pale. "It's awake," he murmured. "The heart knows you're here." Eleanor turned toward the darkness at the end of the hall, where the laughter was growing louder, closer. "Then we find it," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "Before it finds us." The laughter faded into the shadows, but its echo lingered, haunting the corridors like a whisper from the dead. Eleanor's pulse thudded in her ears as she followed the man with the lantern deeper into the castle. The hallways twisted unnaturally, turning in directions that defied logic, ascending when they should have descended, curving in impossible loops until Eleanor began to question whether they were moving at all or simply walking in circles within some great living maze. The walls seemed to change texture as they walked. What began as cold stone slowly gave way to something smoother, almost organic. The torchlight revealed faint veins beneath the surface, pulsing ever so slightly, as though blood still ran through the very architecture. Eleanor tried not to stare too long, but once, when her fingers brushed against the wall, it twitched beneath her touch, and she drew her hand back with a sharp gasp. The man, who had yet to give his name, glanced over his shoulder. "Don't touch the walls," he said quietly. "They remember." Eleanor swallowed hard, her throat dry. "You keep saying the castle remembers. What does that mean?" He hesitated before answering. "Every soul that enters leaves a mark. Every fear, every secret, every death. It doesn't fade. The castle absorbs it. Over time, it became something more than stone." He paused, his voice dropping lower. "Something that dreams." The word dreams hung in the air, heavy and unsettling. They turned a corner and entered a vast chamber filled with decayed furniture and remnants of long-forgotten feasts. A grand dining table stretched the length of the room, covered in tarnished silverware and goblets thick with dust. Above it hung an enormous chandelier, its crystals blackened with soot. The air was dense with the smell of mildew and faint decay. Eleanor's flashlight beam caught something at the far end of the room, a massive portrait hanging crooked on the wall. It depicted a family of 5, Lord Edgar Ashbourne, his wife, and 3 children, all dressed in regal clothing. Yet there was something deeply wrong with it. The children's eyes had been scratched out, replaced by faintly carved symbols that looked like runes. Eleanor stepped closer. The paint near the runes was fresher than the rest, as though someone or something had altered the portrait recently. "What happened to them?" she asked softly. The man's voice was distant when he replied. "They performed a ritual here, near the end. The Ashbournes were obsessed with life after death. Edgar believed he could trap the essence of his family within the castle itself, preserving them forever. But when they completed the ritual, the castle woke up. Eleanor turned to him sharply. "You mean it became alive?" He nodded slowly. "It became them. Every wall, every room, every whisper you hear. Those are the echoes of the Ashbournes. They didn't die. They became the castle's consciousness." The chandelier above them rattled violently, the metal creaking as if angered by the mention of its name. Dust fell like ash from the ceiling. Eleanor stepped back, her flashlight trembling in her grasp. "Then what about you? Why are you still human?" The man smiled faintly, though there was no warmth in it. "Because I refused the castle's offer. It wanted to keep me, to write my name into its walls. But I burned my story from the chronicle before it could finish. That's why I'm neither dead nor alive, just unfinished." Eleanor's stomach tightened. The image of that massive living book returned to her mind, the one that had written her name in blood-red ink. She whispered, "Then I have to burn mine too." The man's face turned grim. "You can't. Once the ink dries, the story is complete. You can't erase what's been written unless you reach the heart. It's where the castle's memory is strongest. If you destroy the heart, you can break its hold. But no one has ever reached it." Eleanor met his gaze. "Then we'll be the first." For the first time, he looked at her not with pity, but something close to admiration, or perhaps sorrow. "You don't understand what you're saying," he murmured. "The heart doesn't hide in one place. It moves, it hunts." They pressed onward. The corridors narrowed, forcing them to walk single file. The air grew colder, heavier, as if descending into an ancient crypt. At times, Eleanor could hear faint murmurs within the walls, soft voices calling her name in dozens of tones, some pleading, some mocking. Once she thought she heard her mother's voice whisper, "Come home, Ellie." And she nearly turned around before catching herself. The man noticed her hesitation. "Don't answer," he said. "No matter what voice you hear, it's not them." After what felt like hours, they reached another set of massive double doors, carved with symbols similar to those she'd seen in the portrait. The carvings seemed to shimmer faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the faint heartbeat that throbbed through the floor beneath their feet. "This is the threshold," the man said. "Beyond this lies the lower chambers. That's where we might find the heart. Or where it finds us." Eleanor ran her fingers over the carvings. They were warm to the touch, like living skin. When she pressed against them, the doors swung open with a low groan. Beyond was darkness. Not the kind of darkness born from absence of light, but something thicker, denser, like a living thing. Her flashlight barely penetrated it. The air inside felt electric, humming faintly, as if the space itself were charged with energy. They stepped inside cautiously. The floor was made of black marble that reflected their faint light like still water. Strange shapes moved just beyond the edge of vision. Tall, elongated shadows that seemed to drift without sound. Then suddenly a whisper, close, sharp, right beside Eleanor's ear. "You shouldn't be here." She spun around, but no one was there. The man's lantern flickered violently, and for a brief moment, she saw dozens of faces appear across the walls. Distorted, screaming faces pressing outward from the stone as though trapped behind glass. Their mouths moved in silent agony before fading back into darkness. Eleanor clutched her chest, gasping. "What is this place?" "The gallery," the man said grimly. "Every soul the castle keeps is trapped here until their story is complete. They're part of its walls now." One of the shadowy forms detached from the wall and drifted toward her. Its shape was vaguely human, but its body rippled like smoke. It whispered in dozens of overlapping voices, all saying her name. "Eleanor. Eleanor. Eleanor." The man raised his lantern, the flame within flaring bright blue. "Stay back," he shouted. The shadow recoiled, shrieking in a soundless wail before dissipating into mist. Eleanor stared at him in awe. What was that? He glanced down at the lantern. Fire made from memory. I took it from the Chronicle long ago. It's the only thing the castle fears, remembrance. It wants you to forget who you are. Once you do, you become part of it. She took a shaky breath. Then I'll remember everything, she said fiercely. Every sound, every word, every breath until I'm out. The man looked at her sadly. I once said that too. Before she could ask what he meant, the ground trembled beneath their feet. The walls around them began to shift, closing in with a grinding roar. The heartbeat grew louder, so loud that it seemed to come from within their own chests. The man grabbed Eleanor's arm and pulled her toward an archway ahead. As they ran, the floor cracked open behind them, revealing a glowing red fissure pulsing like a vein of molten blood. The castle itself groaned in agony, or hunger. They burst through the archway and slammed the iron gate behind them. The rumbling stopped. Eleanor collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. Her entire body trembled, her heartbeat racing faster than ever. She looked up to find the man standing still, staring into the distance. What is it? She asked between breaths. He pointed ahead. Through the dim haze of dust and smoke, she saw it, an enormous door made of black stone, covered entirely in pulsating red veins. Each pulse matched the rhythm of her own heart. In the center was a single round window of glass. Behind it, something moved, something vast and slow, like a giant organ shifting beneath layers of flesh. Eleanor's voice dropped to a whisper. Is that the heart? The man nodded grimly. Yes. And it already knows your name. The glass eye in the door slowly rotated and looked directly at her. Eleanor's body went rigid. She could feel that thing, whatever it was, watching her through the glass. Its presence wasn't merely visual, it was invasive, crawling beneath her skin, sinking into her chest like invisible fingers pressing against her heart. The eye behind the door blinked once, slow and deliberate, the sound like wet leather tearing. Then came the whisper, a voice so close it felt like it was breathing through her. You came back. Eleanor stumbled backward, her heart hammering. What did it say? She whispered, but the man with the lantern didn't answer. He was staring at her with wide, disbelieving eyes. It spoke to you? He asked in a hushed tone. She nodded shakily. It said I came back, but I've never been here before. The man's expression darkened. Then it remembers you. That means... He stopped, as if afraid to say the rest. Means what? She demanded. He swallowed hard. No one hears the heart unless it already has a piece of them. Eleanor's stomach twisted. That's impossible. But even as she said it, a cold sensation spread through her chest. She remembered the diary page she had found earlier, the one that mentioned faces in the walls and the castle waking. Had she read her own ancestors' words without realizing it? Could she be connected to this place by blood, by history? She tried to shake the thought away, but the voice came again, stronger this time, resonating deep within her mind. Eleanor Ashbourne, we have been waiting. The name struck her like a physical blow. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed against the wall. The man rushed forward, steadying her. What did it say? He pressed urgently. It called me an Ashbourne. Her voice trembled. But that's not my name. My family name is Hart. The man stepped back slowly, realization dawning on his pale face. Hart, he whispered. Ashbourne. Heartborn. It's a derivative. Over generations, names change. It's how the castle hides its bloodline. You're a descendant. Eleanor's head swam. No, that can't be true. My family never. Your blood built this place, he interrupted, his voice filled with both awe and dread. The castle isn't just remembering the Ashbournes, It's calling you home." A deep, rhythmic sound began to echo from beyond the door. Thump, thump, thump. As if the very structure were alive, its heart syncing with hers. The walls vibrated with each beat, dust falling from the ceiling like ash. The eye in the door dilated, and the veins around it pulsed brighter, glowing like molten veins of magma. Eleanor clutched her chest, pain radiating through her ribs. "It hurts," she gasped. "It feels like it's inside me." The man gripped her shoulders tightly. "You have to fight it. If you let it in, you'll become part of the castle like the rest." But even as he spoke, she could feel the whisper burrowing deeper into her mind, speaking words she couldn't fully understand. Ancient, guttural, almost sung in a rhythm that made her vision blur. The symbols on the nearby walls began to shift, rearranging themselves in glowing red patterns that pulsed in sync with the heartbeat. "Blood of the builder," the voice said. "Flesh of the memory. You will awaken what your ancestors sealed." Eleanor squeezed her eyes shut, pressing her palms to her ears, trying to block it out. "Stop! Stop talking to me!" The man took a step forward, holding the lantern higher. "It's trying to complete the ritual. You're the key, Eleanor. The last Ashborn by blood." Her breath caught. "You said they performed a ritual. What did it do?" His face grew grim. Edgar Ashborn wanted eternal life, but what he created wasn't immortality. It was imprisonment. He merged his soul, and those of his family, into the stone and mortar of this castle. It gave them permanence, but it also gave the castle consciousness. It became a prison that feeds on memory, emotion, fear. Every generation since then, it's been waiting for blood to return, to finish what he began. Eleanor shook her head in disbelief. "Finish it? You mean, release them?" The man hesitated. "No, free it. The heart is what's left of Edgar, and it wants to be whole again." Before she could respond, the eye in the door blinked once more, and the entire room shuddered violently. The veins on the door stretched outward like living vines snaking across the walls and floor. The air grew unbearably hot, the smell of burning flesh filling her nostrils. "Run!" the man shouted, grabbing her arm. They bolted down the corridor as the door behind them split open with a thunderous crack. A gush of red mist poured out, filling the hall with a low, pulsating hum that made the floor tremble. Eleanor risked a glance back and froze in horror. The eye had transformed into a gaping mouth. From it poured a mass of black tendrils writhing like serpents, stretching along the floor and ceiling. The walls seemed to melt wherever they touched. "Keep running!" the man shouted, dragging her through another archway. They slammed the door behind them, barricading it with a fallen cabinet. The pounding heartbeat grew fainter, but not distant. It was following them. They collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. The man's lantern flickered weakly, its flame nearly dying. Sweat and dust streaked his face, but his expression was grimly determined. "It knows you're awake now," he said. "You can't hide anymore. The castle will twist itself to bring you to it." Eleanor buried her face in her hands. "What does it want from me?" He paused before answering. "Completion. Your blood, your voice, your surrender. If it consumes you, it becomes whole, and the rest of the world won't be safe. The castle won't stay here. It will move again, searching for others. It will spread." Her mind reeled. The idea of this thing, this conscious structure, moving beyond its cursed walls was unimaginable. "There has to be another way," she said desperately. "If I'm connected to it, maybe I can control it." The man gave a humorless laugh. Many thought that. They all vanished. Eleanor looked up, her eyes fierce despite her fear. "Then they weren't me." He studied her for a long moment. "You remind me of her," he murmured. "Who?" He hesitated. "The woman I came here for, a researcher, like you. She believed she could break the curse. Her name was Margaret Hart." Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. "That's my grandmother's name." The man nodded slowly. "Then it's true," You were always meant to return. The revelation hit her like a wave. Her grandmother had vanished decades ago under mysterious circumstances. Her disappearance never explained. Her family had spoken of it in whispers, a story too painful to revisit. But now, standing in the belly of this monstrous castle, the truth became terrifyingly clear. Margaret had come here before her. Eleanor rose to her feet, her resolve hardening. If she came here, maybe she left something behind. A clue. A way out. The man lifted his lantern, its dim light revealing a staircase descending into darkness at the far end of the hall. The archives are below, he said. If she found anything, it'll be there. But we'll have to move fast. The heart won't let us reach them easily. Eleanor glanced once more toward the sealed door, where faint red light still pulsed beneath the cracks. She could almost feel it watching, waiting, whispering in a voice that was both hers and not hers. Come back to us, Eleanor. She turned away. Let's go. They descended the stairs, step by slow step, into the depths, where no light seemed to exist. The air grew thicker, heavier with every breath, and the whispers followed them, hundreds of voices murmuring fragments of stories long forgotten. And as they vanished into the shadows, the great door behind them quivered, and the eye opened once more, watching, waiting. The descent felt endless. The air grew colder with every step, yet the deeper they went, the more Eleanor's skin burned. It wasn't from heat, but from a kind of energy, an unseen pulse that throbbed beneath her flesh, tugging at her nerves as though the castle's heartbeat had merged with her own. The walls around the spiral staircase were slick with condensation, veins of red stone glowing faintly like dim embers buried in coal. The man's lantern flickered weakly in the suffocating darkness. His name, she learned as they walked, was Isaac. He had been trapped in the castle for years, or decades, he wasn't sure anymore. Time, he said, flowed differently here. The castle feeds on time, he murmured once. It stretches it when it wants to torment you and collapses it when it wants to consume. When they finally reached the bottom, the air shifted. A low humming sound vibrated through the chamber ahead, almost like 1,000 whispers speaking in unison. The floor leveled out into a long, vaulted corridor lined with towering shelves. Books, scrolls, and loose papers lay scattered across the stone floor, their pages browned and crumbling with age. Strange mechanical devices, rusted and broken, were positioned between the shelves, some resembling typewriters fused with glass tubes filled with black liquid. Eleanor's breath caught. This place, it's massive. Isaac nodded, his face lit dimly by the orange glow of the lantern. The archives, built by the first generation of the Ashbournes to document their rituals, their bargains, their failures. Every secret ever written about this castle is buried here. Eleanor stepped forward cautiously, her fingers brushing over the nearest book. The moment she touched it, the pages trembled, then turned on their own, flipping rapidly as though searching for something. A single sentence stopped her cold. Blood remembers what stone cannot. The ink on the page shimmered faintly before fading away, replaced by a sketch, an image of a woman with sharp features and familiar eyes. Her grandmother. Margaret Hart. Eleanor's knees weakened. This can't be real. Isaac leaned closer, his expression grim. It's real. The castle remembers everyone who leaves a mark inside it. That's how it keeps them alive, in a way. Eleanor traced the outline of her grandmother's face. The sketch shifted as she watched, the lines rippling until the woman's eyes blinked, slowly, deliberately. Eleanor gasped and stumbled backward. The sketch spoke. Eleanor, if you're reading this, the castle knows. It always knows. Her grandmother's voice was faint, distorted, like an echo trapped between two worlds. You have to finish what I couldn't. The Ashbourne curse wasn't born of greed alone. It was protection. Edgar tried to bind death itself, but something else came through. It wears his face, but it is not him. Don't trust the walls. And don't trust anyone who says they can help you. The ink started to smear, dripping down the page like blood. The voice continued, growing weaker. If you reach the heart, you must choose. Seal it again, or let it out. But if you free it, the world will end the way ours began. The page burned black, curling at the edges and then dissolved into ash. Eleanor stared at her trembling hands, unable to speak. She knew. She tried to warn me. Isaac's expression hardened. Then maybe she's still here. Some of the lost souls never leave. They become part of the castle's memory. If she made a mark strong enough, we might still find her. Eleanor shook her head, stepping away from the ashes. No, she wanted me to end it, not to find her. Isaac turned toward a row of iron-bound books along the far wall. Then we'll need the codex. The codex? The Ashbourne Codex. A record of every blood pact, every ritual that ever shaped this place. If there's a way to seal the heart again, it'll be inside that book. But it's not exactly easy to retrieve. Eleanor frowned. Why? He hesitated, then pointed to a large, circular vault door at the end of the corridor. It was massive, easily 10 feet tall, carved with spiraling runes that pulsed faintly like the veins of a living organism. Because the codex is kept behind that door, and it doesn't open with a key. How then? He met her gaze with quiet dread. It opens with memory. Before she could ask what that meant, the castle groaned. The floor beneath them shivered, dust raining from the ceiling. The humming grew louder, the shelves trembling as unseen energy filled the chamber. Then the whisper came again, low and guttural, echoing through the air like a chorus of voices all speaking her name. Eleanor, come closer. Isaac spun around, panic flashing across his face. No, don't listen to it. But Eleanor couldn't help it. The voice was magnetic, almost soothing in its tone, and it came from the direction of the vault door. The runes on the metal began to glow brighter, swirling like fireflies caught in a storm. You don't have to fight it, the voice whispered. It's already inside you. You were born from it. Eleanor's vision blurred. The sound wrapped around her mind like a fog, pulling her forward one step at a time. Isaac shouted something, but his words were distant, muffled. She reached out and pressed her hand to the cold metal of the vault. The instant her skin touched it, a shock ran through her body. Images exploded in her mind. A vast chamber filled with chanting figures in blood-red robes, a circle of symbols burning into the floor. Her grandmother, Margaret, standing at the center, her eyes glowing white as she screamed words Eleanor couldn't understand. And behind her, a towering shape made of shifting shadows, with a dozen faces all whispering in unison. Eleanor gasped and pulled her hand away. Her knees buckled, and Isaac caught her before she fell. What did you see? He demanded. Something wrong, she whispered, her voice trembling. It wasn't just Edgar. There was something else here, something that used him. My grandmother tried to stop it. Isaac looked toward the vault, his face pale. Then that's what's behind the heart. The thing that used him never left. The whisper grew louder now, surrounding them, almost mocking. He was weak. She was weak. You are not. The runes flared bright red, and a deep rumbling filled the chamber. The vault door began to turn, the metal grinding against stone as if unlocking itself. Isaac grabbed Eleanor's arm. You have to stop it. I can't, she cried. It's doing it on its own. The door cracked open slightly, releasing a wave of freezing air that smelled of decay and dust. From within came a faint red light, pulsing like a heartbeat. And then, from the crack, a thin black mist began to seep out, moving like liquid shadow slithering along the ground toward them. Isaac raised his lantern, backing away. It's too late. Run. Eleanor stumbled backward, but the mist was faster. It coiled around her legs like smoke, whispering in voices that sounded eerily familiar. voices of people she'd known, loved, lost. Her grandmother's voice echoed among them. "Eleanor, don't let it touch you." But it was already crawling up her arms, seeping beneath her skin like ink spreading through paper. Her veins turned dark, her heart pounding wildly. Isaac grabbed her shoulders, trying to pull her away, but a sudden force flung him across the room, crashing into the shelves. The vault door burst open, and from within came a massive shadowed figure, tall, skeletal, its face hidden beneath a crown of thorns made of blackened bone. It had no eyes, yet Eleanor felt its gaze burning through her. "You woke me," it said, its voice deep as thunder and soft as death. "Now finish what was begun." Eleanor fell to her knees, her breath frozen in her chest. She wanted to scream, but the sound wouldn't come. The creature's hand extended toward her, long and thin, dripping with black liquid that hissed when it hit the ground. "Who are you?" she whispered. The creature tilted its head. "I am what your blood made me." The chamber began to shake violently, books tumbling from shelves, the walls cracking open. The shadow surged forward, and then everything went dark. Eleanor woke to the sound of whispers. Soft, constant, and so close it felt as if they were breathing directly into her ears. The floor beneath her was warm, pulsing faintly, and when she opened her eyes, she found herself lying on black stone that shimmered like wet glass. A dull crimson glow filled the vast chamber around her, casting long, trembling shadows that moved without light. She tried to rise, but the moment she did, her body swayed. The air here was thick, heavy with something ancient, a weight of centuries pressing down. The scent of iron filled her nostrils, sharp and metallic, like blood spilled long ago but never dried. And then she saw them. Figures stood in a wide circle around her, dozens of them, draped in crimson robes embroidered with the same runic symbols she had seen etched into the vault door. Their faces were hidden behind masks made of bone and gold, their eyes hollow sockets burning faintly from within. They swayed rhythmically, whispering words she didn't understand, each syllable vibrating through her skull like the hum of a living machine. She turned slowly, fear rising in her throat, and realized that she was no longer in the present. The air itself felt different, ancient and alive. Somehow she had crossed into the castle's memory, its past. At the center of the circle stood a tall man wearing a heavy black cloak. His face was gaunt, his skin stretched tight over bone, and his eyes glowed a deep red like molten embers. In his hands, he held a blade of silver that seemed to drip light instead of blood. "Edgar Ashbourne," Eleanor whispered, "the founder, the one who started it all." He turned his head sharply toward her as if he had heard her thought rather than her voice. "Who speaks my name?" The chanting stopped. Every masked figure turned toward Eleanor in perfect unison. Their hollow gazes pinned her in place, and the air grew unbearably cold. I'm not supposed to be here," she stammered. Edgar stepped closer, his boots echoing softly on the stone. "And yet you are," he said, his voice smooth, heavy with authority. "The castle remembers its own." He studied her for a long moment. "You bear my blood." Eleanor's heart raced. "I'm not one of you. Whatever this is, whatever you did, it needs to stop." Edgar's lips twitched into something like amusement. "Stop." He laughed quietly, the sound low and humorless. "You stand inside eternity and ask it to stop?" He gestured around him, and the floor beneath their feet began to shift. The black stone rippled like liquid, rising and reshaping until a massive altar emerged from the ground. Carved into its surface were intricate symbols that glowed faintly, pulsating in sync with the heartbeat of the castle itself. "This is where we unmade death," Edgar said softly, almost reverently. "We gave the world a new god, and we built it with our own souls." Eleanor shook her head. "You built a prison. You trapped yourself and everyone else inside a nightmare." His gaze darkened. "No, We were betrayed. The ritual was meant to free us from mortality, but something came instead. Something older than this world. He leaned closer. Do you know what it said to me, child? Eleanor hesitated. What? He smiled, a hollow, broken smile. It said, you built this place for me, and it was right. The stone, the blood, the sacrifice, all of it became its vessel. The castle you walk in now is not mine, it's its. Eleanor felt a shiver run down her spine. You're saying the castle itself is alive? Edgar nodded slowly. Alive and starving. It feeds on memory, emotion, fear, anything that tastes like humanity. It takes what it wants and leaves behind only whispers. He began to circle the altar, running his hand over the glowing runes. When your grandmother came here, she tried to end it. She thought she could destroy the heart, but she only wounded it. And in doing so, she bound her own soul to this place. She became part of its memory. Eleanor's throat tightened. She's still here. Yes, Edgar said, but not as you remember her. He extended his hand toward her, and suddenly the world around them shifted again. The chanting voices faded, the robed figures vanished, and Eleanor found herself standing in a dimly lit hallway lined with portraits. The air was filled with the scent of decay and dust. Each portrait showed an Ashbourne ancestor, their painted eyes following her as she moved. But there was something wrong about them. Their faces seemed to shift when she wasn't looking, eyes changing color, smiles turning into grimaces, features melting into shadow. At the far end of the corridor hung a final portrait, larger than the rest. It depicted a woman standing before the castle gates, holding an open book. Her face was unmistakable. Margaret Hart, her grandmother. Eleanor approached it slowly. The moment she was within arm's reach, the painted woman's eyes moved. Eleanor, the voice whispered from the canvas. Eleanor stumbled back, tears filling her eyes. Grandma, is it really you? The voice was faint but warm, familiar yet strained, as if carried from a great distance. I tried to seal it. I tried to protect you, but the castle doesn't let go. It remembers everything. Even me. Tell me how to stop it, Eleanor begged. Please. The woman's painted lips parted, but before she could speak, the portrait began to crack. Long black fissures spread across the canvas, and from within them oozed the same black mist Eleanor had seen in the vault. Her grandmother's face twisted in pain. It's listening. You have to go, Eleanor. Before... The canvas exploded outward, releasing a violent wave of cold air. Eleanor was thrown backward, crashing into the wall. The corridor trembled as the portraits around her began to scream. Hundreds of distorted voices overlapping into a single deafening shriek. The walls rippled, and faces began to form within the stone. Eyes, mouths, all moving, all whispering her name. She covered her ears, but the voices were inside her head now. Eleanor, the blood, the key, the door. The floor beneath her cracked, glowing red from within. The air itself seemed to shatter, and she fell. Down, endlessly down, through darkness, through cold, through time itself. When she landed, she was back in the present. The chamber was in ruins, the vault door blown apart. Isaac lay motionless a few feet away, his lantern shattered beside him. The shadowed figure, the creature from the vault, was gone, but its voice still echoed faintly through the cracks of the castle. Now you see. Eleanor staggered to her feet, trembling. The red light of the heart pulsed faintly beneath the broken floor, deeper still within the castle. She could hear it calling, steady and patient, like a heartbeat waiting to sync with her own. She turned to Isaac, shaking him. Wake up, we have to move. He groaned weakly, his eyes fluttering open. It's too late, he whispered. It's awake now. There's no stopping it. Eleanor clenched her fists. Then I'll finish what my grandmother started. Isaac looked at her, pain flickering in his eyes. You don't understand. To seal it again, you'll have to give it what it wants. What does it want? He swallowed hard. You. The floor beneath them rumbled, and a voice, low, immense, and ancient, rose from the depths. Come to me, Eleanor Ashbourne. Bring me home. The walls around them began to twist, reshaping into a spiral leading downward. The path was opening on its own. The heart was calling her. Eleanor took a deep breath, her fear melting into grim determination. Then I'll go to it, but not to serve it. She stepped forward into the red-lit spiral, disappearing into the shadows below. And as she descended, the castle smiled. The spiral passageway seemed to stretch endlessly downward, each step echoing into a hollow abyss that devoured sound. Eleanor moved carefully, her fingers brushing the damp stone walls for balance. The deeper she went, the heavier the air became, thick with the stench of rust, earth, and something sweetly rotten. A crimson haze pulsed faintly below, illuminating the tunnel like the inside of a living artery. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The castle was alive and watching her. She felt it in the way the walls subtly shifted under her touch, the faint hum that grew louder with every step, the steady rhythm that matched her heartbeat perfectly. Somewhere above, she could still faintly hear Isaac shouting her name, but his voice was distant now, blurred like an echo from another lifetime. At last, the staircase opened into a vast underground chamber, a cavern so large she couldn't see where it ended. The walls glowed with faint veins of red light, moving like slow rivers beneath translucent stone. In the center stood a massive structure, a pulsing, heart-shaped mass of dark flesh and stone fused together, chained to the floor by enormous black iron roots that snaked outward in every direction. It beat with terrible regularity, slow, deliberate, each pulse shaking the ground beneath her feet. This was it, the heart. It wasn't just alive, it was aware. As Eleanor approached, she felt an invisible force tugging at her mind, drawing her closer, whispering words directly into her consciousness. Blood returns to blood. Stone remembers the maker. You were born to finish what began. She clutched her temples, gasping, "No, I won't be your vessel." The whispers shifted, becoming gentler, almost coaxing. "But you already are. Every beat of your heart echoes mine. You think you came here by choice? You've been walking back to me your whole life." Eleanor trembled, her eyes darting across the room, and froze. Shapes moved within the walls. Faces pressed against the stone from the inside, their features distorted but unmistakably human. Eyes rolled upward, mouths opened in silent screams, hands clawed weakly at the surface before fading back into the stone. Among them, for just a second, she saw her grandmother's face. "Grandma!" she cried, running toward the nearest wall. But as she reached it, the surface rippled like water, and her reflection replaced her grandmother's image. Only it wasn't truly her. The reflection smiled when she didn't. "You can't save her," the reflection said softly. "She made her choice. Now it's your turn." Eleanor backed away, heart pounding. "I don't believe you." The reflection tilted its head, its smile widening unnaturally. "You should. You were born for this, Eleanor. You are the key, the final piece." The floor beneath her trembled as the iron chains anchoring the heart began to move, twisting and tightening like serpents. One of them snapped suddenly, the sound reverberating through the cavern like thunder. The heart shuddered violently and a wave of energy surged outward, knocking Eleanor off her feet. She hit the ground hard, the wind leaving her lungs. The pulse grew louder, deafening now, and the whispers became screams. "Free us! Feed us! Finish the binding!" Eleanor scrambled backward, her hands slipping on the slick floor. "No, I'm not your blood. I'm not part of this." The ground split open beside her, and from the crack emerged a vision, a memory, or perhaps a warning. She saw Edgar Ashbourne again, older this time, kneeling before the same heart. His body was frail, his eyes hollow, but his expression was one of worshipful awe. Around him lay the bodies of his followers, drained, lifeless, their faces frozen in silent terror. He pressed his hands to the heart's surface, whispering words of devotion. "You promised eternity. You promised freedom from death." The heart pulsed, its deep voice echoing through the chamber. Eternity was given. You simply misunderstood what it meant. Edgar screamed as the flesh of the heart reached out, wrapping around him like tendrils. His body convulsed, his skin tearing, his bones cracking. And then, in a moment of grotesque beauty, he was gone. Absorbed. His scream turned into the heartbeat's rhythm. The vision faded, leaving Eleanor trembling on the ground. She understood now. The heart wasn't a relic or a curse. It was a parasite. It had used the Ashbournes, lured them with promises of immortality, and consumed them one by one until it had grown strong enough to think. And now, it wanted her. "Why me?" she whispered. The heart pulsed again, the sound deep and slow. "Because you are the last. Your blood completes the circle. The line of creation and destruction, begun by the Maker, ended by the heir." Eleanor's breathing quickened. "If I die, you die too." The heart laughed, a sickening sound that rattled the chamber. "No, little one. If you die, I live forever." She stumbled to her feet, searching for anything, any tool, any weapon that could help. Her eyes landed on a broken piece of the iron chain lying nearby, its edge jagged and sharp. She grabbed it, holding it tightly in trembling hands. "I won't let you win." The heart's surface rippled, and from its core emerged a humanoid shape, tall, dark, and impossibly thin, its body half flesh, half shadow. It moved with unnatural grace, its face a smooth void save for two burning red eyes. "You sound like her," it whispered, Edgar's voice, but hollow, distorted. She said the same thing before she screamed. Eleanor tightened her grip on the iron shard. "I'm not her." "No," the creature said softly. "You're worse, because you still believe you have a choice." It lunged forward. Eleanor swung wildly, the shard slicing through its arm. But instead of blood, black smoke poured out, thick and oily. The creature barely flinched. It struck her across the chest, sending her crashing into the wall. Pain shot through her ribs, but she refused to stop. As she struggled to rise, her eyes fell upon an object lying half-buried near the base of the heart, a small, leather-bound book covered in dried blood. Her grandmother's diary. She crawled toward it, every movement a battle against gravity itself as the heart's pulse grew faster, stronger. The creature reached for her again, but she grabbed the book and flipped it open. The pages glowed faintly, words burning into visibility. "If you stand before the heart, remember, it feeds on your fear. Don't give it what it craves. Give it silence." Eleanor's eyes widened. Silence. That was the key. She rose shakily to her feet, clutching the book to her chest. The heart's voice thundered through her mind, urging her to scream, to beg, to speak, anything to let it in. But she closed her eyes and said nothing. The creature lunged again, but this time, its movement slowed. The whispers faltered. The entire chamber seemed to hesitate. Eleanor focused every ounce of will she had left into stillness, her breathing, her heartbeat, her fear, until all of it became silent within her. And then, the impossible happened. The heart stopped beating. The sound vanished completely. The air froze, the light dimmed, and the red veins on the walls went dark. The creature shrieked, its body collapsing into smoke that dissipated into nothingness. The ground trembled violently, cracks splitting across the chamber floor. Eleanor dropped to her knees, gasping as the heart began to crumble, stone and flesh separating, the chains retracting into the earth. She had silenced it. But as she looked closer, she saw that at the center of the collapsing mass, something small and black was still beating, weakly, but alive. a single piece of the heart that refused to die. And from that fragment came a faint whisper. You can't silence what is part of you. Eleanor stared in horror as her reflection shimmered in the fragment's glossy surface, and smiled back at her. The dust settled slowly around her as the great heart collapsed into ruin, each tremor fading into the hollow silence that now filled the cavern. The air was still, too still. No heartbeat, no whisper, not even the faint hum of life that had once haunted the walls. For the first time since entering the castle, Eleanor felt the weight of true quiet pressing against her ears. But silence was never meant to last in this place. A faint vibration stirred beneath her palms as she knelt beside the broken fragments. The small black shard at the center, the remnant of the heart, continued to pulse, its glow weak but steady. The whisper that escaped it was faint, like breath on glass. You can't silence what you are. Eleanor recoiled, staring at her reflection within the shard. It stared back, but it wasn't a perfect mirror anymore. The eyes were darker, deeper, almost crimson, and the lips curled into a smile she didn't make. She shook her head violently, her pulse racing. No, you're not me. The reflection tilted its head, mocking her denial. You silenced the castle, but not yourself. You think you destroyed it, but it only moved. Moved? She whispered. The reflection's eyes glimmered with cruel amusement. You absorbed it, Eleanor. You gave it silence, the only thing it could never consume. And in doing so, you gave it a vessel. Her stomach turned. The realization struck like ice down her spine. The silence wasn't outside her anymore. It was inside. She could feel it, deep within her chest, beneath her heartbeat, a strange foreign rhythm that wasn't quite hers. The ground quivered, not from the castle this time, but from her own trembling body. She felt something shift within her veins, a dark pulse spreading outward, coiling through her limbs like smoke. Her hands began to shake, her skin paling as faint red veins crawled across it, glowing softly. No, she whispered hoarsely, backing away from the fragment. I ended you. The reflection's grin widened until it split unnaturally across its face. You ended the noise. Now the silence begins. Eleanor stumbled back until her spine hit the stone wall. Her breath came in sharp, shallow gasps. The walls around her remained eerily still. No whispers, no movement. Yet the silence had become oppressive, suffocating. The more she tried to breathe, the more the stillness pressed down on her chest. Then she heard it, faintly at first, then louder, the echo of her own heartbeat. But it wasn't beating in rhythm with her. It was answering her. Thump, a pause. Thump. Each beat was slower, deeper, deliberate, like something ancient listening and responding. She clutched her chest, terrified. Stop, she gasped. Stop! But the echo didn't stop. It grew louder, stronger, matching the same pulse she had silenced minutes ago. The heart was no longer in the stone. It was inside her. Suddenly, the castle around her began to move again, not collapsing this time, but awakening. The broken walls straightened, the shattered chains slithered back into place, and the faint red veins reappeared along the ceiling, glowing brighter with every beat of her heart. No, she whispered, trembling. It's not possible. It is you, the reflection said from the shard, now burning with crimson light. You are the last Ashbourne. The castle was never built around the heart. It was built around your bloodline. You are its final form. Eleanor fell to her knees, her breath ragged. Images flashed through her mind. Her grandmother whispering old family prayers, her father's warnings never to return to the ancestral land, the strange nightmares that haunted her childhood. It all made sense now. The heart hadn't been waiting for her by chance. It had been calling her home. As the ground beneath her shimmered, she realized the entire chamber was changing. The blackened walls melting into bone-white stone, the ceiling stretching upward until it resembled the grand hall of a cathedral. The heart's remains lifted from the ground, rising into the air, and the fragment before her dissolved into ash. When she looked down again, her hands were glowing faintly red. The castle was her now. Every brick, every corridor, every dark whisper that had tormented her family for centuries, it was all alive again, through her. She screamed, but no sound came out. The silence devoured it instantly. Her throat moved, her body convulsed, but the air refused to vibrate. She could no longer speak, or perhaps she no longer existed in a world that could hear sound. Then the silence spoke. It didn't come from outside. It came from within her, a chorus of 1,000 voices whispering as one. Be still, child of the Maker. In stillness, all things begin again. Her vision blurred. The air around her rippled, and for a moment she saw them. The faces in the walls, the generations of Ashbournes before her, staring silently. Not angry, not fearful, just waiting. Waiting for her to take her place among them. She shook her head violently, tears streaming down her cheeks. I won't end like you. But the voices replied calmly. You already have. The floor beneath her opened, and she was pulled downward, through layers of earth and darkness, through corridors of bone and memory, until she found herself standing once again before the heart. Only now it was not chained. It hovered freely, radiant, pulsing in harmony with her. It beat once, and she felt her own chest answer. It beat twice, and her lungs filled with that thick crimson glow. It beat thrice, and she understood. The silence was not death, it was transformation. The whispers returned, not as threats, but as a lullaby. They wrapped around her mind like a dark, comforting veil. Rest, and the world will remember. Her body began to dissolve, not into ash, but into the same living stone that made up the castle. Her hands, her arms, her face, all turning pale, translucent, absorbing into the very walls that surrounded her. The last thing she saw was her reflection, perfectly still, perfectly calm, carved into the stone where she had stood. Her eyes were closed, but a faint red glow pulsed beneath her skin, beating in rhythm with the castle's heart. Above, the storm clouds parted. The wind howled softly through the empty corridors, carrying no sound, only the faint rhythmic vibration of a pulse that would never stop. The castle had fallen silent once again. But deep beneath its floors, a faint heartbeat echoed. Steady, eternal. Eleanor Ashbourne was gone. The whispering castle was alive.